Lindsay and I were talking, we've talked a few times, and one of the things we were talking about was this book, which is really interesting, because not many people have heard of it. The Science of Getting Rich. What's it saying about the law of attraction, which is like the first, the very, I mean, you know, really the precursor, a long, long time ago. When was it written, did you say, Lindsay?
He was in 1910, yes. And he was one of the very first guys to write about the power of abundance and thought and creating your life. So, you know, there's so much today, isn't there, around manifesting an abundance, but he was one of the ones talking about, you know, decide what you want to do, have the picture in your mind, take the steps, take the action. It's really important to take the action and not to be sidetracked. He talks about competition actually, but not to be sidetracked by others around you, to know where you want to go. And also what I really like is that he talks about giving back more than you ask for.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, isn't it? And I mean, he was so far ahead of his time, wasn't he? And
he really was.
Still is now. And you know, you think about things like The Secret and Chicken Soup for the Soul and those things. You know, he was writing about this years and years ago.
Yeah, he really was. And what he talks about, which I really like, is about leaving the world a richer place. And it made me think a bit about you, actually, Petronella. Let me just read this little quote here. You know, I love a good quote. It says, "Give everyone more in use value than you take from him in cash value. So you're adding to the life of the world." And I think he talks about the richness of life. So I think when people buy your book, they're not just paying for the cost of the book, are they? They're stepping into a world of wealth and richness to do with their health.
Exactly.
So that, you know, however many, I don't know how much it is, the book, but you know, a small investment can change the richness of your life, and that's what he's talking about. So
no,
he was really ahead of his
lovely
time.
No, thank you so much. And it's been in print, I think, this book, since, I'll just show you again, since it was first published.
I have the complete works. Of course I have the complete works. And also I think what is quite interesting, we'll just touch on this, is that he and also Catherine Ponder, who wrote The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, wrote it from a religious perspective as well. So they incorporate that, because I think very often that can get a little bit muddy, the concepts around there. So it's really interesting that they were addressing those issues right back at the beginning of the last century.
Yeah, really, really fantastic. Lindsay, I meant to start off by telling everybody a little bit about you, because you've had, oh gosh, now it's gone again. That's the other funny thing that happened to both of us. You know, we had a long conversation about a month ago, and neither of us could find our notes about it. It was like we'd been haunted by something, but then eventually they turned up, so that was good. But I just wanted to tell you, lovely HBDers, a bit more about Lindsay. She went to Oxford, so she's not just a pretty face, Oxford University, and she's dual qualified as a solicitor in the city and as a teacher. And her absolute joy was teaching maths, and particularly to girls who lacked confidence. She realised there wasn't any teaching for adults or children about money, which she sees as a crucially important life skill. So I hope she's going to, yes, and then about 5 years ago, she began to immerse herself in the education of money. She went part-time at work, so she had more time for this immersion. And then she launched Money L Plates, from scared to smart. Because, in Lindsay's words, I think we have to learn money, like learning to drive a car. And she's now a certified money coach who teaches and coaches a combination of practical and mindset programs for women mainly, to enable them to feel comfortable about managing their money. And you can join her Money L Plates Club and go on to her Instagram page to find out more about it and check her bio. So sorry, I should have started with that, Lindsay. No, but you're so inspiring and so lovely. And we started talking about the correlations between health and wealth, or money savviness and health savviness. And you've written some amazing notes, Lindsay. I don't know if you want to get cracking with that, but one of the things, as you said, is it's never too late to start.
I truly believe that, Petronella, and I do think I mean, I'm 55 now, and the last 30 years has whipped by. I mean, I feel 24, and it's really interesting where time goes. I don't know what I've been doing with it. Obviously, I've been quite busy, and I think just to get started, and the life that you've lived previously in terms of money or in terms of food doesn't have to be the way going forward at all. You can just make a decision, and it's as simple as that. Just make a decision and think, I'm going to change.
I love that.
And
yeah, that's really liberating, isn't it? Because we can choose.
Yes.
We can choose the way we live our life. We can choose what we put on the end of our fork, and we can choose to get savvy about our money. And obviously most of us want more of it, but the money we have got, how to manage it and to get the most out of it, basically.
Yeah. And also, Petronella, to know there's nothing wrong with that. I really believe, because I spend my life talking about money, and it's a subject, particularly here in the UK, where people can be a little uncomfortable. We were raised, believing that talking about money is vulgar, and money is the root of all evil, and frankly, when women have money in particular, but when all good people have money, we can do more good. And I really believe that. And because there has been this lack in education for women, and that's not our fault, it is what it is historically. It was only in 1975 that you could have your own bank account, when they brought in the Sex Discrimination Act in 1975. So that was when I was 6.
Can you repeat that? I mean, that is an incredible statistic. 1975.
1975, when I was 6 years old.
You were 6 years old, and that was the first year that women were allowed to have their own bank accounts?
Without their husband's permission, or without their father's permission if they didn't have a husband. So therefore, money education as such has not really been part of our life. Well, it hasn't been a part of my life, although I was brought up with parents who did do a little bit of investing, and that's how I got into it. And we were from a very modest background. That's the other myth, that you need to have loads of money to invest. You don't. You can, my mum, bless her, used to put £25 a month from her teaching salary into a fidelity trust and things. So you can start with very, very small amounts. But it's just getting started. So it's the best day is today to get started.
Are they still around, your parents? They must be so proud of you.
Well, that's very kind. My dad sadly died. He 13 years ago. It was very unfortunate. He died of an arrhythmia, and I think also that is something that has sort of forged my path, because Dad was very careful. He was from the post-war generation. He was, we were pre-computers, so we could access things quite easily. There was none of that lost passwords and things like that. And he had been very wise and very smart, and so we had to, in the middle of grief, it's really hard to have to deal with finances.
It is,
to be honest. And whether it's grief from a divorce or grief from anything really, or from death, it's I think having a handle on our money is quite an important thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Would you surely have, Lindsay? And I'm seriously, I am going to join up with you, because I would love to learn more about it. And as you say, it's a bit like talking about death. There's that weird taboo about talking about money, and if you want more of it, you're considered greedy, and all sorts of negative stuff around it.
But we can do so much good. We can do so much good. We put, there are lots of statistics to show that women, when they invest, do so much better, actually, because we are more long-term and low risk. And then when we invest in ethical businesses, or we choose to invest back into education of children, and we impact the lives of families and therefore the communities. And I think, every bit of good we can do in the world as it is at the moment has to be a good thing. Really.
No, definitely a good thing. And Lindsay, you came to HBD through Donna Ida.
I did. back in the heady days of 2020. Do you remember when I loved them on a Tuesday? And I used to sit over there in the sunshine, looking into the garden, and I loved it. And gosh, I still have Donna's words ringing in my ears about no milk, no milk. And also, Petronella, you really inspire me, because back in those days, you were not comfortable, were you, being on Instagram? It was just going live. You just, we have to do things that make us, that we feel uncomfortable about.
We do.
And then look at you now, whipping on. And
that's really sweet of you, Lindsay. Those were fun days, weren't they? And it was You could always raise a laugh from Donna by talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I tell you what, the messages go in, don't they, when it's fun, and when it's, it's a bit rude or whatever, it works that way.
They do.
So,
They really do.
yeah.
So I think actually you said before you started HBD, you already knew that there were correlations between the health of our bank accounts and, our physical health. Yeah. And what was there one particular thing that sort of took you down that path that made you think about the connections or the similarities between looking after our finances and looking after our physical health?
Petronella, I think it was my own personal experience. So, I liken the sugar monster to the spending monster. So, I've got, the sugar monster is really real and always has been. And, growing up in Lancashire, it was how we were brought up, with grandma baking and that kind of things, sweet, had a cup of tea, any crisis whatsoever, you'd have a cup of tea and there'd always be something to go with it. And again, that was post-war, wasn't it? So I slightly blame my upbringing for my sweet tooth. But I then noticed, when I was a lawyer in the city, and earning good money, how I could just spend it, and it was just easy. And it was emotional spending, a bit like the emotional eating. So I know that when I'm reaching for, or used to reach a cup of tea and something sweet, it was because I was having other feelings. And I think it was only through HBD that I really could dive into that and look at what was triggering me, really, but it's the same with spending. So here in Newcastle, we have the most beautiful Phoenix store, and I know that when I feel a bit out of sorts or a bit lonely or a bit bored, I can think of nothing better than going into Phoenix and having but I've learned that I can go into Phoenix, but I don't spend. I could spend on every single floor, and that's a whole different world of, the world of credit card, which is something that I teach a lot on. But yeah, it's my own personal experience, and I thought, golly, fairly well educated, and I should be able to make decent choices in my life. But it's like having a blind spot, isn't it? And then finding it.
Really interesting. So shopping as a kind of soothing activity, in the same way that we sometimes comfort eat. And but I suppose that the difference is hopefully that when you're spending, you're getting something that you really like, or you're talking about doing the kind of spending that actually we end up with all sorts of stuff that we don't really want. It's just the buying of it. Yeah.
Yes, and I often, and now it's gone online, and we can talk a bit later about my recommendations for shopping online. But so my particular weakness, Petronella, this is slightly embarrassing, is a stripy top. Okay, so I can buy a stripy top at the drop of a hat. It's where I go, where I have so many lovely stripy tops. I love them, but I've had to learn to say, okay, I've got the vest, I've got the short sleeves, I've got the long sleeves, I've got the jacket, and it was when I made that connection that I don't need the stripy top because I have a wardrobe of them, but there's something about the going and the trying it on and the moment of exchange that is obviously a dopamine hit. And that's what we're after. And I do think this dopamine, this constant need to find the dopamine, especially now we've got social media and people are chasing the likes and all that kind of thing, that it's almost dulls the dopamine hit. I don't know whether you agree with that.
I completely agree. And now you know that about the stripy top. What do you do? You still look at your stripy?
It's not a bad addiction.
It's not a bad addiction. It could be much worse. But do you still look at them with joy, or do you give them a kind of withering look and say, "Yeah, I know what your game is"? What's your relationship?
Well, that's a good one. I'm going to do that when I'm next to Phoenix. I like that, having a little script as to say what do I think about that stripy top. I look because I like to look, and I know that's a trigger for me, and and so I've learned. I admire other people's stripy tops, but like I say, I have plenty. I had one on just before the live, and I thought, no, I'll go a bit smarter on a stripy top. But yeah, it's finding what those triggers are.
Yeah, and then getting into getting yourself into the shop and knowing before you go that actually you're not going to buy anything, you just want to have a look.
Yeah. And I think a bit like, so, you know, we talk about the fasting on HBD, and sometimes I think sometimes you have to bring in those guidelines. So it's like putting up the you go bowling and you put up the sides for the children so the ball doesn't go off. It's a bit like putting the sides up. So, you know, knowing what you're going to shop for, and actually also like with food, you know, never going to shop for food when you're hungry. It's a bit similar. So maybe, you know, looking really smart going into town, maybe wearing a stripy top to remind myself I don't need another one, and enjoying it. And maybe my treat, as it were, during that trip would be to have a black coffee, if that works, you know, within the whole scheme of things. So it's knowing. I think we very often follow the paths which make us feel better. Which is what we're doing with the food.
And it's a funny thing, but you know, so many of the things that we're attracted to, that we, you know, that we might want, like, I don't know, a donut or something, and you know, eat it, and then you feel bad afterwards because you know that it's not having a good effect in your body. It only lasted for a couple of minutes, you know, the feeling of eating it and the pleasure. Whereas something like, I know I'm always talking about the freezer we've got here, but you know, that sometimes it is a bit, you don't really look forward to getting into it every time, but when you do and you sit there for a few minutes and you get out, the feeling is, you know, euphoria, which we definitely don't get from eating something we wish we hadn't.
I mean, it's the same as, you know, when you get to the 4 hours on the fast. And you know, it's something you drummed home, isn't it, that's the feeling when the sweeping is happening, and that's when you know you're burning fat, and that's when you drink the water.
Exactly.
And it's almost quite it's like, oh, you know, because you are in control, and then you feel great about it, don't you? And then I think because you've put that gap between you and the food, when you then go to have your supper at the end, or whichever meal it is, you can take a more mindful moment before you pile in. Whereas if it's the donut, it's a bit of the, you know, the teenage moment of just ramming it in, and you haven't even noticed it's touched the sides.
No, very, very interesting. And Lindsay, would you say that you found HBD easier because you got your head around money and all sorts of those similarities that we were talking about, and it not being, like you were just saying, you know, sort of looking forward to dinner rather than having it now, you know, if it wasn't sort of, if there wasn't a 5-hour gap, that kind of thing, and actually waiting for things makes them often more pleasurable.
Yes, the thing I liked about it, Petronella, is that you make it really easy. So I like that's how I teach, you know, just break it into easy steps. Nothing is that complicated. Money isn't that complicated. You know, there's a lot of jargon to make it feel complicated. So I really like the fact that I had my 10 rules in the first book. I had my page of 10 rules. And also the book is so short, I could read it in a sitting, you know, and I can refresh. And every time I read it, I find something else in there. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I said to you, didn't I, that I wrote the letter. So I always thought, a bit like you do, oh, I'm absolutely fine. I overeat a bit of sugar and I'm absolutely fine. But then I realised that my balance had really tipped off, and I just wasn't feeling very happy at all. And I was really, and I couldn't pull myself back up into the centre. So having those very simple rules made life a lot easier, because there was no complication. It was like, this is what you do. And there was no, you know, yes, you weigh, but like you say, you get your eye in really easily. But it's to me, and also the fact that you backed it up with the science, Petronella. You know, the justification and the explanations are very thorough. It's not just a whimsical thing; it's a way of living, isn't it?
It's no good. I don't think, for most of us, if we don't understand why we're doing something, then it's too easy to come unstuck, to break the rules, to you know. But when we realise the importance and why each rule is there in place, then it makes it nuts not to stick to it. You know, as long as we've got really clear about our whys, you know, what do we want to change? What's the inspiration or dissatisfaction that's drawn us to HBD or whatever it is, you know, like your course or your club. Is it a course that you're teaching, or it's...
So I do have courses, but at the moment I'm about to launch a club membership, because I think there's so many courses out there, and people there's lots of stats saying that people don't finish them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start running a live club, really, where you can come and you join, you become a member, and then every month I'll do a live, and I'll combine teaching, so it might be about investment or credit card debt or money archetypes or whatever, with coaching as well. Because I think, you know, if it was so easy, isn't it interesting? It's the same with food. If it was so easy, we'd all be doing it.
We'd all be doing it, yeah, exactly.
But we're not doing it.
Yeah.
So I think, and it's because we get complicated up here. I think you know, we overthink, don't we? And we procrastinate and ruminate.
Easy when we know how.
Yeah, it is easy when we know how. Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about the money archetypes?
Yes. So I'm a practitioner in money archetypes. So, and it's one way of categorizing who you are when it comes to money. And it's Kendall Summerhawk, and there's a variety. I mean, there's not really the time or space to go in here, but there's celebrity, nurturer, accumulator, alchemist, romantic. There's about 8 of them, and basically it's really quite magical how everyone is so different with money, but you'll have certain traits which will be causing you to feel great about money, but also a bit of a shadow side as well, you know, as to what. So I'm a ruler, that's one of them. Ruler, celebrity, alchemist, I think it is. The alchemist always trips me up because I overthink. That's like the law, you know, I see both sides and I think, oh, but what if they don't like that? But what if they like this? And it, you know, it gets a bit complicated. But it just gives you a framework within which to view money, because I think many of us don't even think about it. We don't even think about it. And we wonder why we feel a bit rotten about it. It's definitely one of those things that people tend to push away, don't want to engage in. And do you know what, Petronella? What I find absolutely fascinating is we're all so different with money, and our relationship with money is like our relationship with food, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and I think you should keep your relationship and your journey with money as close as you can, a bit like you should with your food. Yeah. Now, I know that you are married to the wonderful Ricardo, but I don't have a chef here where my home. And if I farmed out the food, the cooking side to my partner, my husband, it would be a bit of a disaster, actually. When I first met him, he just lived on cornflakes and chocolate trifles. Yeah, pretty much. So it's a really personal relationship that we know we have with food, because we can see a cause and effect straight away. But with money, we tend to push it away, and we can just farm it out to other people for no reason other than we just don't know how to handle it ourselves. And I think that's what my education is around. I want everyone to feel comfortable around it, and to, I don't know, just, you know, it's not hard, and it's just creating something for the future, which is a better health for your money.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I think that what you said earlier on, which I had no idea about 1975 being the first year that women were allowed to have a bank account without getting their husband's permission or whatever. You know, so much has changed. So yes, it's not in our DNA. Well, it's obviously going to be in your children's DNA and in theirs. So they will. Yeah.
I don't know, because you know how your children don't listen to you. My children don't listen to me.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Yes. They'll have to go somewhere. In fact, I did pay them to have money education elsewhere a few years ago, because I thought they're not going to listen to me here. And you know what, Petronella, I'm going to put my hand up and say I absolutely have made mistakes. And I think that's the other thing about because I'm a real perfectionist and I have very high standards, and I've had to learn to drop that. And I think one of the things that stops women getting into money and starting to do some investment is they think they have to know it all. Yeah. And you don't. You just have to get going. And you have to know that as long as 51% wins, then you'll be all right. You know. And
you don't have to be good at maths.
No. No. I mean, we've got a calculator, and no. I mean, I think that fear of maths, again, is something I've talked to a lot of women about. You know, that's what, when I ask them about money, they say, I wasn't any good at maths. Yeah. And I say, well, and that's really hard, because that's a feeling they had about their maths lesson, which isn't necessarily relevant anymore. You know, it's not translating. It's not translating today.
So true. Did you have a nice maths teacher at school?
I had a lovely maths teacher at school.
Yeah, I think that really helps.
Yeah, it made a really big difference.
Really big difference.
Yeah, she really helped, and I loved it. And in fact, when I came to qualify, it's either be an accountant or be a lawyer. So I don't know why I picked the law. Should have gone down accountancy. I don't know. But I think it's the helping people is the underlying theme through my career.
Yeah, but also maybe because you knew that you could do accountancy standing on your head, but training as a lawyer was more of a challenge, maybe.
Actually, it was being able to help people who were stuck. That was my driving force. Yeah. Wasn't quite like that when I got there. Anyway,
that's what you're doing now.
Yes, that is what I'm doing now. Yeah.
No, that's really wonderful. So you really like the rules about HBD, and you kind of enjoyed the 5-hour pause between meals. And like you said, I think it's really important for anybody who's with us now, who hasn't started or who's, a newbie, that, it's really good to embrace that feeling that you have around the 4-hour mark of feeling really hungry, and to remind yourself why you're doing this 5-hour fast. And that, around 4 hours is really when we start to burn the fat. Everything starts to change. So, welcome that feeling rather than reject it, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
No, I just remember you saying be excited when you get that feeling, and that's it is, because it's your body giving you a signal, isn't it? And it's like, oh, okay, I can, and it's finding, just listening to your body, which I think is so powerful.
Yeah, so powerful, exactly. And that's what this is all about, really, isn't it? And tuning in to how we feel about things, to how we feel about our food, how we feel in our body, how we feel about our finances, and as you said, we're nurturing ourselves, so the chances are we're going to live longer than we might otherwise have lived. And if we're going to live longer, we need to sort our money out, because it's got to last us a longer time.
Yes, we do, because I think the stats are that in America, when over 13% of women live in poverty, and obviously there's different indicators of what poverty is. Yeah. But it's an accumulation of situation, the wealth gap and things, the wage gap and the wealth gap, and it's because as women, we tend to be more in a caring position, whether it's for parents or whether it's for children, or and so we end up not earning as much, perhaps with not so many benefits, not saving, and then the chap's going to die early, which isn't great, is it? And then we're left with with having to look after ourselves. So whilst again it's a really hard thing to have a think about the future, I think it's quite important to keep an eye on it. And just relying on your pension these days is, well, I don't think it's ever been enough. A pension is just one form of investment, but you can create others, so I think it's really important. Now I dug out some stats about the footballers, actually, Petronella, because we did talk, didn't we, yesterday, about when people make lots and lots of money and they can't seem to hang on to it. I didn't realise that 40% of footballers go bankrupt after 5 years.
Oh no.
Which is really sad. That came from the Ex-Pro charity, which supports retired footballers. And basically, the stats are that these young players get given so much money, so they just expand their spending, and they don't invest. And if they do invest, unfortunately, they're very vulnerable to risky investments. So instead of doing quite a sensible, so it's quite boring one, they spend all their money, and the more they spend, the bigger houses they need to put the stuff in, and all that kind of thing, and they don't invest, and so they end up with huge tax bills and dire straits. And it's really
tragic, isn't
sad,
it?
actually.
Sad. Because they think those young guys, that they'll always be young, as we always used to think. I used to, that people who looked, they were like in their 50s or 60s, had just been very careless. There was no need to get to that sort of state. Now we know.
Absolutely.
And I suppose probably the same thing happens with models. They're making lots of money, they're very, very young and not very clued up, and then what happens to them when they stop modeling? I hope they do better than the footballers, but I kind of suspect they probably don't.
No. Well, I think there's a very famous model called Pauline. I can't quite remember her last name. She's very honest. She's been on a couple of podcast talking about finances where she was making a huge amount of money, and she thought her husband was investing it and he never was, and then he died young or youngish and left her really impoverished.
Oh God.
And she's very honest about it, and she's recovered in different ways in terms of being able to carry on making money. But I think putting someone else between you and your money is as I get older, I think it's much wiser to know where you are with it. And you just have to be comfortable with your numbers and just know what's coming in and going out, and choose to make a small amount into savings and investments ready for later on, the rainy day scenario that hopefully won't come.
Yeah, hopefully it will never come, that nasty rainy day. Yeah. It's so interesting chatting to you about this, and I loved you shared some common vocabulary. We're thinking about HBD and thinking about looking after ourselves financially, managing our finances. And, all of this self-love, self-care, self-forgiveness, self-kindness, clarity, nurturing, nourishing, and learning and being true to ourselves, it all, all overlaps, so much of it. And just to come back to visualization, which is key, but not about really feeling what we want in our life. Not just having a wishy-washy goal, but really feeling it, really describing it, really seeing it vividly in bright colours and things. I think that's really key.
It's very powerful, that, isn't it?
It is powerful, isn't it?
I was going to say that you did this lovely exercise. I told you yesterday about writing the letter, didn't you? And I did that, and I think with money, that's a very good exercise as well, because I think we get all tangled up in what our beliefs are around money, because we simply learn from the family. We haven't learned from anywhere else, so we learn money pretty much alongside emotions. It's quite interesting, because especially if you see any arguments or tension, it will tend to be around a financial situation. And so those childlike emotions, which you can't really process, you then carry into adulthood. And so you see money through the lens of your childhood experience. So can you say a little about writing the letter? Because I thought it was a really powerful thing to do, and it's something I did when I did HBD. When I started HBD.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I wrote about it in the book, and I always had a difficult relationship with my dad. We were slightly frightened of him. Well, we were frightened of him because he had an amazing temper, and he was sometimes physically violent as well. And I remember holding my breath in the maths classes at school, because he really cared that I was good at maths, and I didn't want to do anything to please him, kind of thing. And it was really sad. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, by the time he died, I still hadn't forgiven him. I wasn't able to talk to him, and I was studying psychoneuroimmunology a few years after he died. And Leo, our teacher, said, if there's somebody in your life you've lost, they're no longer in your life, and there are things that you wished you'd been able to tell them, well, you can, he said, you can write them a letter. And sometimes it's a very difficult letter, a letter of accusations and kind of sounding like hatred and everything else. And I wrote that letter to my dad, and I was very surprised and shocked actually by what came up and the language I was using to talk to him in. But then, having accused him, somehow I could start to understand him. And with that understanding came forgiveness. For me personally anyway, I couldn't go from feeling the way I was feeling to forgiveness. There had to be a catalyst, and the catalyst was writing that letter and really getting all those feelings out. And then, as you say, you burnt yours, and I threw mine away. And thinking about writing a second letter, and I didn't need to either, but I did write him a second letter to accuse him, or to, process other unpleasant things to come up. But I did write him again a few years after that, and I wrote him like a really loving letter, telling him how much I loved him, how much I appreciated, the good things that he did, and the things that he taught us, and having that feeling that if I saw him now, I'd literally run to him and throw my arms around him. So may that day come. And
isn't that powerful, the release of those thoughts and emotions, because we can get stuck on a loop, and we can't, and it becomes, those thoughts become a belief, don't they? And they're not necessarily true.
Not true even, exactly.
No.
Yeah, it just goes round and round and round, gathering more stuff as you know, as they go round. So no. So I'm really glad that helped too, Lindsay. It's really magical.
Yes, it really helped me. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And my mum, I mean, I feel no need to write her a savage letter at all. But the only thing that really surprised me, because she always said that she was too poor and broke and everything else. And there was a point in her life when she left my dad, and he didn't support her in any way. And I always wondered why we ate so much soup. And she said, well, that was all I could afford to give you. But she was very clever. The second guy she married always told her how intelligent she was, whereas my father always told her how stupid she was. And so she acted like an intelligent person, and she started her own business, and it was a nanny agency. And she made lots of money, and she started investing it really well, and she bought properties and everything else. But she still had this mindset that she was broke, and so I was always buying her groceries for her, and thinking, well, she wouldn't buy smoked salmon for herself, so that kind of thing, until she died, and I had to write this massive check to whatever they're called, not the Inland Revenue, HMRC, which was really, really shocking. And I thought, how could she possibly have thought that she was broke? It was really nuts, because I didn't know about all her canny investments until she'd gone.
Good for her. Yeah. And that's, maybe that's from feeling there wasn't enough, from those feelings that she'd had from times where money was tight, and so she felt that she had to keep that money there. But isn't that amazing what I love that story. There's such a contrast, and isn't it amazing what confidence does?
Yeah.
So
really,
being told you're intelligent, being told you can do it, which is what I used to love to do when I was teaching. You can turn children around, and obviously adults around. We're just hearing that.
Yeah,
it's so powerful.
It is, isn't it? I mean, in a way, he kind of my stepfather really pushed her into it, because he sort of said things like, I don't know exactly what he said, but he implied that he didn't want her being a housewife, just sort of sitting about, that she needs to do something that interested her, that got her out of bed in the morning. And so they were a very good team, really. And she
lovely.
Was very successful with it. Yeah. And a very good writer. But her mother, like you said, Lindsay, my mum was born in 1936, so the war, and people of that era, they still save bits of string and all sorts of things.
Yeah, and I'm afraid I do things like that as well. That's how we were brought up, wasn't it? I have to say, I do fold wrapping paper up when it's if I can salvage it off the children every so often, that kind of thing. and that's just, but then in today's world of sustainability and being environmentally friendly, that was just normal, wasn't it? Was just to save those bits, to not be wasteful.
Exactly, to recycle and reuse.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
really true. Linda, it's so lovely talking to you. I wondered if you could talk to us a bit more about your tips and pattern interrupters, for things like the spending monster, and that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. So, well, obviously I've shared my story about the spending monster. So there's various things that I would suggest putting into place. So if you know that you're quite vulnerable to overspending, particularly on credit cards, and there have been some scientific studies done on the impact of your brain when you use a credit card. So effectively, when you tap either your phone or the card, there is no activity in your brain whatsoever. Your brain doesn't recognize what you've done because you put off paying a credit card. And that's why people, and it's so dangerous, and it upsets me so much, because people have everything on their phones now, and it's tap, tap, tap. And especially with the younger generations, I don't know quite how we're going to teach them about the value of money. But if you have to physically hand over cash, and it's a really hard process. So if you went into town with £100 and you're going to buy your lunch and maybe a stripy top and do the grocery shopping or something like that, you would find it very hard. So there is brain activity when you have to spend money. I'm sure you would come home with a lot more than if you went with your credit card and kept tapping when you know. So one of the practices that I encourage is to tidy your purse up, first of all, to to improve your relationship with money. If you've got lots and lots of cards, lots and lots of receipts, lots and lots of stuff in your wallet or your purse, I would go into it and pretty much you should be able to, if you need a credit card, you should be able to survive on one, or I have one which is cut up, which I use for online purchases only. So if I was, for example, buying a flight or a holiday or something where using a credit card makes more sense because of the insurance aspects, then I have a credit card in a drawer that I push the two sides together. So it stops me from using it in shops.
Basically. I love that.
Some people do all kinds of things. People freeze them in blocks of ice, but I never, I'm sure I would use a hammer and chisel to get it out. Anyway, so your wallet or your purse should be very streamlined. And if you can use cash, then if you are prone to overspending, I would suggest going on to cash, which Petronella is like the old housekeeping way, isn't it? My mum had a tin with cash in it, where you literally took your money out at the beginning of the week and spend cash. I know it's not a popular way, it's not an easy way anymore, and a lot of places don't accept cash, but I do think if you can manage to shop in local businesses, they prefer cash because they're not paying the fees. And in fact, when we were just in Australia in April, and it was really interesting because a lot of the businesses there would rather you paid in cash because they don't want to pay the fees. And just on another side, so just on the kind of flip side of that, Visa and MasterCard are two of the most successful companies in the world at the moment. Yeah. So in terms of investing,
to us,
it's good to have them in your shares, in your basket of shares, because their success across globally is phenomenal. However, it's at a price of spending cash. So I always try to use cash. I do try to keep it alive. And plus, my two lads they do holiday work in the hospitality industry. So they don't get any tips because everyone's just using cards all the time.
That's awful, isn't it?
So I always have an element of cash. So you will know if you are prone to overspending. I say look at that credit card maybe, and credit card debt is a whole different. I do a whole course on that, and I would also say just at this point, please don't feel ashamed if you have credit card debt because it's in the past you've used it to invest in other things, and either you can sell those things or maybe if I buy courses, I buy them on credit cards. So there's a mindset to be had around credit card debt, but it's not, the shame it's not shame. So when we were talking, when we were talking about those triggers, those emotional triggers going into Phoenix, so a bit like, so you recommend keeping a food diary, don't you?
I do, yeah. I mean, some people take photographs rather than write it down, and I think that works for a lot of people, but for me personally, I would always write things down.
Yeah. And then the emotions that you feel alongside them.
Yes, and how you felt afterwards, an hour afterwards or 3 hours afterwards, or even the next day, things like gluten. It can be really hard to pinpoint gluten as a problematic food because it might not manifest until even 2 days later. But if you keep a note of everything, that a pattern will emerge. Like it might be dairy or it might be, lots of us have problems with sugars, immunologically as well as emotionally, and it is very pro-inflammatory. So I think it's a really, really good thing. And also remembering what Claire, Diet Health Fitness, talked about on the live, that she kind of got stuck in a rut and her weight had plateaued, but she had been writing things down. She'd been keeping a food diary, and she thought, oh my goodness, I've been having broccoli, green beans and carrots every day for the last 2 weeks. So she shook that up. That was all she did. She just changed the vegetables that she had, and the weight started to come off again. Amazing. Yeah.
Actually, just talking about that, last week we went on an impromptu picnic up the coast here. It's very beautiful, and we just literally threw some things. In fact, we went to Marks and Spencer's on the way, and I had things that I don't normally have. So I think it's all what I call boy food because it's carb heavy, and I had a cup of tea and I had a hot cross bun or something like that. And on the day after Petronella, and I don't particularly drink, I felt awful. I felt absolutely awful when I woke up, and I thought, oh my goodness, what's happened? And then I thought, I'm sure it will be connected to, because it was food that I'd taken out of the equation and bringing it back in, and it made me feel awful.
I'm very sorry, but it's quite interesting to see that in action, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You have a really good diet and then you eat lots of junk one day, or even a bit of junk, and many people are still struggling about the treat meals, because in some people's minds it's an opportunity to just eat a lot of junk.
Yeah.
And of course, if junk is your pleasure, there's nothing wrong with having a bit of junk once a week. But really, it's about tuning into your body and realizing that if you eat that kind of food, you're not likely to feel great the next day.
Yeah.
And we want to feel better. And like you were saying, Lindsay, we want to be around for a long time. Not just be around, but really feeling well, not taking endless medications and hobbling about on a stick, to feel vibrantly, really, absolutely, thoroughly well and happy in and out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would say do something similar with a spending diary. So if you want to become aware as to why you're spending, it's quite good to try and take a step back, almost like an overview. If you could see yourself spending, and keep a diary as to what those emotions are. A bit like me going into fitness because I'm a bit lonely or something like that, because I'm working at home on my own. And I think an acknowledgement, it just takes an extra moment, doesn't it, to acknowledge that emotion, and then you can take an action there. So I was going to say this. I don't know if Kath's here. Is Kath here? Mrs. Add to Basket, our lovely Kath.
I haven't seen her, but I'm not very good at seeing who's on.
I haven't. No. So I would say if you're doing online, I would leave stuff in your basket for up to 24 hours.
Nice.
Before you, and then revisit, because very often your emotions will be different 24 hours later.
Yeah. You'll think, that stripy t-shirt, I don't even like it.
Exactly. I've got 100.
delete.
delete. Yes. And I think on that note, sort of the late night online scrolling is a bit like late night food when you've had, anything after wine is just not a good idea. If you're having wine.
Exactly. No. Exactly. Anything except water.
Anything except water. Yeah.
And maybe some vitamin C, because that gets depleted by wine.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was going to say is just as something a bit different, which is to try fasting with your money. So a bit like, treat your money like your food. So as you're doing your HBD, think, can I do something similar with my food? So if I'm spending, can I enjoy that spending, or can I enjoy that eating? So make it a lovely experience, and then fast in between. So it's just make it pleasurable, and then the lack of, because it is an emotional spend, or a lack of control, because we're trying to chase those emotions, we're trying to make ourselves feel happy.
Yeah, so really, putting space between whatever the object of desire is, and actually allowing ourselves to look forward to having whatever it is, rather than impulsively buying, eating.
Yeah. So it's a bit like grazing, isn't it? Going through the shops and just picking up is a bit like grazing.
Yeah.
Stay classy with it, I say.
Are you writing a book?
No, I should. I've got bits and pieces. I will do. I will do. Yes. But what I love about yours is your voice very much comes through.
Thank you so much.
I can hear you talking, and I think that's really powerful, isn't it? Just
thank you. Yes, I think it is, and that's people talk about finding your voice. I mean, I think that when I'm writing, I'm conscious to try and write in normal English rather than
technical.
Not use too many adjectives, but I think that's about it.
And never use too many adjectives.
Don't start.
They're wonderful.
You're wonderful. Thank you so much, Lindsay.
So are you, Petronella. You inspire me, and it's a joy. And you literally, Tuesday evenings are a gift.
Thank you so much. Well, snap. You're a gift as well, and we're very blessed that you came to talk to us about this, and it's really interesting. And I hope that there'll be lots of people who will have a look at your page and think about joining up for Money L Plates, because I'm certainly going to do it.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. But thank you.
Lovely to see you, my dear.
Lovely to see you, dear Passion. I'll talk very soon, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you too.
Bye-bye. Bye.